Zara Th had seen many species in her 3 centuries of life, but humans remained the strangest puzzle in the galaxy. As a diplomatic attaché for the Veltar Confederation, she had studied their files extensively before this assignment. The reports painted them as a young species, barely 200 years into space travel, with a peculiar tendency toward both extreme violence and unexpected compassion. Standing in the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge, Zara Th watched the blue-green world of Kepler 442b rotate slowly below them. The planet had been contested territory for nearly a decade, with 3 major powers claiming mining rights to its rare trilithium deposits. Today's negotiations would hopefully end the standoff peacefully. The human delegation had arrived an hour earlier in a ship that looked more like a flying fortress than a diplomatic vessel. The UES Determination bristled with weapons that could crack a moon in half, yet its captain had requested permission to dock with all the politeness of a merchant trader. Humans, Zara Th mused, were walking contradictions. The human representative is requesting to meet with you privately before the formal negotiations begin, announced Klex, her Zendari aide. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of nervousness. Ambassador Chen specifically asked for you. Zara Th's crystalline features shifted into what humans called a smile. She had worked with Ambassador Chen twice before, and, despite his species' reputation for unpredictability, she found him refreshingly direct. Send him to Conference Room 7. And, Klex, prepare the usual hospitality refreshments, but include that earth beverage they call coffee. Strong coffee. 20 minutes later, Zara Th sat across from Marcus Chen, watching him cradle his coffee cup like it contained liquid life itself. The human looked tired, she noticed. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there during their last meeting 6 months ago. Ambassador Chen, she began, activating her translation matrix to ensure perfect communication. You seem troubled. Are the negotiations weighing heavily on your mind? Marcus took a long sip of coffee before responding. Zara Th, I need to tell you something, and I need you to trust me when I say it. What we're walking into today isn't just a mining rights dispute anymore. The Veltar diplomat felt her internal temperature drop slightly, a physiological response to sudden concern. What do you mean? 3 days ago, our long-range scouts detected a massive fleet moving toward this system. 47 ships, all bearing the insignia of the Korth hegemony. Marcus leaned forward, his brown eyes intense. They're not coming here to negotiate. They're coming to take the planet by force and eliminate anyone who might oppose them. Zara Th's mind raced. The Korth were known throughout the galaxy as aggressive expansionists, but they had never moved this far into neutral space before. Are you certain? The Korth haven't been seen in this sector for over 50 years. Our intelligence is solid. They'll arrive in approximately 18 hours. Marcus stood and began pacing, a habit she had observed in humans under stress. The other delegations don't know yet. The Rigel Commonwealth and the HFY Collective are still thinking this is about mining rights and trade agreements. Why are you telling me this? Zara Th asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Marcus stopped pacing and looked directly at her. Because your people have the fastest ships in the galaxy, and you have the most extensive communication network. If this goes bad, if the Korth decide to make an example of this place, someone needs to warn the rest of the galaxy what's coming. The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy cloak. The humans were asking her to be their messenger, their voice to the galaxy if they didn't survive what was coming. It was both an honor and a terrible responsibility. What are you planning to do? She asked quietly. What humans always do, Marcus replied with a grim smile. We're going to stand our ground and fight. The formal negotiations began 2 hours later in the Grand Assembly Hall of the Harmony's Edge. Representatives from 5 different species sat around the circular table, each bringing their own cultural perspectives and agendas to the discussion. The Rigel Commonwealth's delegation, led by the insectoid ambassador Trixka, argued passionately for shared mining operations. The HFY Collective, represented by the ethereal ambassador Lethmore, advocated for strict environmental protections that would limit any extraction. Throughout the discussions, Zara Th found her attention repeatedly drawn to the human delegation. Marcus sat calmly, occasionally asking clarifying questions or offering measured responses. But she could see the tension in every line of his body. His aide, Commander Sarah Walsh, kept checking a small device that Zara-TH recognized as a military communication unit. As the hours passed, the debates grew more heated. Ambassador Trixka's mandibles clicked angrily as she accused the Theks of environmental extremism. Ambassador Lethmore's normally calm demeanor cracked as he defended his people's position with increasing passion. Through it all, the humans remained strangely quiet, offering only occasional observations that seemed designed to keep the peace rather than advance their own agenda. It was during a particularly heated exchange about mining quotas that Commander Walsh's device chimed softly. Zara-TH watched as the human's face went pale, and she leaned over to whisper urgently in Marcus's ear. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, then stood slowly. "My fellow ambassadors," he said, his voice carrying across the room with surprising authority. "I need to interrupt these proceedings. We have a situation that affects all of our peoples." Ambassador Trixka's compound eyes swiveled toward him. "What kind of situation, human?" "A Korth battle fleet has just entered the outer system," Marcus announced. 47 ships, moving in attack formation. They'll reach Kepler 442b in approximately 6 hours. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Trixka's mandibles spread wide in alarm, while Lethmore's form seemed to shimmer with distress. The smaller delegations from the Yolan Republic and the Free Trade Coalition began talking rapidly among themselves. "This is impossible," Trixka clicked. "The Korth haven't been seen in this sector for decades. Your intelligence must be mistaken." Commander Walsh activated a holographic display that filled the center of the table. The image showed a three-dimensional map of the star system, with dozens of red dots moving inexorably toward the planet below. The signatures were unmistakably Korth, their ship's angular designs distinctive even at extreme range. "I wish we were wrong," Marcus said quietly. "But our deep space monitoring stations have confirmed it. They're coming, and they're not coming to talk." Ambassador Lethmore's voice carried a tremor of fear. "What do we do? Our ships are not equipped for combat. We came here for peaceful negotiations." "You evacuate," Marcus replied simply. "All of you. Get your people off this planet and out of this system as quickly as possible." "And what about you?" Zara-TH asked, though she already suspected the answer. Marcus looked around the table, meeting each ambassador's gaze in turn. "We stay. We fight. We buy you time to escape and warn your governments." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Trixka's translator crackled to life. "Human, you cannot seriously be considering facing a Korth battle fleet with 3 ships. It would be suicide." "Maybe," Marcus acknowledged. "But it's what we do. We don't abandon our commitments, and we don't let bullies run wild in civilized space." Commander Walsh pulled up another display, this one showing the human fleet composition. 3 ships: the diplomatic vessel UES Determination, the escort destroyer UES Defiance, and the support cruiser UES Perseverance. Against 47 Korth warships, it seemed laughably inadequate. "This is madness," Lethmore whispered. "Noble madness, perhaps, but madness nonetheless." Zara-TH found herself studying the human faces around the table. There was fear there, certainly, but also a grim determination that she had never seen in any other species. These beings truly intended to stand against impossible odds, not for glory or territory, but simply because it was the right thing to do. "How long do you need?" Marcus asked the assembled delegates. Trixka consulted her aide rapidly. "The Rigel ships can be ready to depart in 3 hours. But our cargo vessels are slow. We would need at least 8 hours to reach minimum safe distance. The Theks require 4 hours for proper departure protocols," Lethmore added. "But we could manage emergency evacuation in 2 if absolutely necessary." Marcus nodded. 8 hours, then. "We'll give you 8 hours." As the diplomatic meeting dissolved into urgent evacuation planning, Zara-TH approached Marcus privately. "Ambassador, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course. Do you truly believe you can hold them off for 8 hours?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the planet below. When he spoke, his voice was soft but steady. "Honestly, I don't know. The Korth are experienced fighters, and they outnumber us more than 15 to 1. But we have advantages they don't expect, such as human stubbornness, for one thing, he said with a slight smile, and a few surprises they won't see coming. But, Zara-TH, I need you to understand something. If we don't make it, if the Korth break through our lines, this won't end here. They'll use Kepler 442b as a staging ground for deeper incursions into civilized space. This is where we make our stand, because this is where it has to be stopped. For hours later, Zara-TH stood on the bridge of her personal transport, watching the last of the evacuation ships clear the planet's atmosphere. The diplomatic station had been abandoned, its automated systems broadcasting a surrender message that no one expected the Korth to honor. Below, on the planet's surface, mining facilities and research stations stood empty, their personnel evacuated to safety. Ambassador, her pilot announced, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Put it through, Zara-TH ordered. Marcus's face appeared on the main screen, but he looked different now. Gone was the diplomatic attire, replaced by a dark blue military uniform. His expression was calm, almost serene, in a way that made Zara-TH's skin prickle with unease. Zara-TH, thank you for getting everyone out safely. We're going to take our ships behind the planet's shadow now, out of your sensor range. I need you to promise me something. What is it, Marcus? No matter what happens next, no matter what you see or hear, don't come back. Get to the edge of the system and stay there until it's over. And if we don't make it, make sure the galaxy knows what happened here. Marcus, she began, but he cut her off gently. It's been an honor working with you, Ambassador. Take care of yourself. The transmission ended, leaving Zara-TH staring at a blank screen. She turned to her pilot. How long until we reach the system's edge? 2 hours at maximum speed, Ambassador. Then, let's go. And prepare a full sensor array for long-range monitoring. I want to know everything that happens here. As her ship accelerated away from Kepler 442b, Zara-TH found herself thinking about human history, the fragments she had studied in preparation for diplomatic contact. They were a species that had fought countless wars among themselves, had nearly destroyed their own planet multiple times, yet had somehow emerged from that crucible with an unshakable moral code, and an almost pathological unwillingness to abandon their principles. She had read about their ancient wars, their resistance movements, their last stands against overwhelming odds. Stories of warriors holding mountain passes against impossible numbers, of soldiers defending cities to the last man, of ordinary people becoming extraordinary when faced with tyranny. She had always thought those stories were exaggerated, the stuff of legend and propaganda. Now, watching 3 small ships disappear behind a distant planet to face a fleet that should crush them like insects, she was beginning to understand that perhaps those stories weren't exaggerations at all. Perhaps they were simply who humans were, at their core. The next few hours would reveal whether human courage was stronger than Korth firepower. Somehow, despite all logic and reason, Zara-TH found herself hoping beyond hope that it would be. The Korth fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a plague of metal locusts, their angular black ships materializing against the star field in perfect formation. From her position at the edge of the system, Zara-TH watched through long-range sensors as 47 warships arranged themselves in a massive sphere around Kepler 442b, their weapons already charging. Ambassador, her sensor operator announced, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. The Korth are broadcasting on all frequencies. Let me hear it, Zara-TH commanded. The bridge speakers crackled to life with a harsh, guttural voice speaking in the brutal consonants of the Korth language. Her translation matrix rendered it into smooth Veltar. Inferior species of this system, you have trespassed on territory claimed by the Korth hegemony. Surrender immediately and prepare to be processed. Resistance will result in total annihilation. The message repeated 3 times, then cut off into ominous silence. Are we detecting any response from the human vessels? Zara-TH asked. Her sensor operator shook his head. Nothing, Ambassador. They've gone completely silent. Our sensors can't even locate them behind the planet's shadow. Minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness. The Korth fleet maintained its position, apparently waiting for a response that wasn't coming. Zara-TH found herself gripping the arms of her command chair, her crystalline claws leaving small scratches in the metal. Then, without warning, space around Kepler 442b erupted into chaos. The first indication that something was wrong came from the Korth fleet's rear formations. Ships that had been holding steady formation suddenly began maneuvering wildly, their weapons firing at targets that Zaratach's sensors couldn't detect. Bright flashes of plasma and particle beam weapons lit up the darkness like a deadly fireworks display. "What are we seeing?" she demanded. "Where are the humans?" "I don't know, Ambassador," her sensor operator replied, his voice filled with confusion. "The Korth are firing, but I can't detect what they're shooting at. It's like they're fighting ghosts." As they watched, one of the massive Korth battleships suddenly lurched to one side, atmosphere and debris streaming from a massive hull breach. The ship's reactor went critical seconds later, creating a brilliant nova that briefly outshone the system's star. Then, Zaratach saw them. 3 ships materialized out of nowhere, not through hyperspace emergence, but simply fading into visibility like morning mist dissipating. They were moving impossibly fast, weaving through the Korth formation with an agility that defied physics. The human vessels seemed to dance between the much larger enemy ships, their weapons reaching out to touch target after target with surgical precision. "Stealth technology," breathed her pilot. They were hiding right among the Korth fleet. The human ships weren't trying to engage in conventional combat. Instead, they were striking at specific targets with devastating efficiency. Sensor arrays vanished in balls of plasma fire. Weapon hardpoints were surgically removed with precisely aimed particle beams. Communications towers were severed from ship hulls with what appeared to be some kind of cutting beam Zaratach had never seen before. "They're not trying to destroy the entire fleet," she realized aloud. "They're disabling them systematically." The Korth, masters of brutal direct assault, seemed completely unprepared for this type of warfare. Their ships were designed to overwhelm enemies with raw firepower, not to fight opponents who struck from stealth and vanished before retaliation was possible. They fired wildly into empty space, trying to saturate areas where the human ships might be hiding, but their targets were always somewhere else. Commander Walsh's voice suddenly crackled through the communication array, transmitted on a tight beam directly to Zaratach's ship. "Ambassador, this is UES determination. Are you monitoring the engagement?" "We're watching, Commander," Zaratach replied. "How are you doing this?" "Our sensors show you engaging targets at impossible ranges and speeds." "Human innovation, Ambassador. We've had 200 years to study every other species' technology and improve on it. Turns out, when you combine Veltar stealth fields with Rigel targeting computers and Thex power management systems, you get something really interesting." As if to punctuate her words, another Korth ship erupted in flames as its main reactor was somehow destabilized by a weapon that had struck it from over 50,000 kilometers away. "The problem is," Walsh continued, "we can only keep this up for so long. Our ships weren't designed for this kind of sustained combat, and we're running low on the exotic materials that power our stealth systems." Zaratach watched as the human formation began to shift, the 3 ships moving into a tighter defensive pattern. The Korth fleet, reduced now to 39 functional vessels, was beginning to adapt to their tactics. Instead of trying to target the human ships directly, they were beginning to saturate entire areas of space with overlapping fields of fire. "Commander, how much longer can you maintain this?" "Maybe another hour," Walsh replied. "But we've bought your people time to get clear of the system and alert your governments. That's what matters." It was then that Zaratach made a decision that would haunt and inspire her for the rest of her long life. "All stop," she commanded her pilot. "Ambassador," he asked in confusion. "I said all stop. Bring us around. We're going back." "But, Ambassador," her aide protested, "the humans specifically ordered us to stay away. This isn't our fight." Zaratach stood slowly, her crystalline features hardening into an expression of absolute determination. "It became our fight the moment 3 human ships decided to stand alone against impossible odds to protect strangers. Send a message to the other evacuation fleets. Tell them what we're about to do." She turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel to the human fleet." Commander Walsh's face appeared on the screen, looking surprised and concerned. "Ambassador, what are you doing? You need to get out of here." "Commander, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." If we brought our ships back to assist you, would it make a difference? Walsh was quiet for a moment, and Zarath could see her calculating odds in her head. Ambassador, with all due respect, your ships aren't equipped for this kind of combat. You'd just be giving the Korth more targets. That's not what I asked, Zarath replied firmly. I asked if it would make a difference. A slow smile spread across the human commander's face. Yes, ma'am. It would make a difference. Every ship matters now. Then, we're coming back. The return journey to Kepler 442b took 45 minutes at maximum acceleration, and, with every passing second, Zarath could see the human position deteriorating. 2 of their 3 ships were showing significant battle damage, and their stealth systems were beginning to fail as power reserves dwindled. The UES Defiance was the first to become fully visible, its stealth field finally collapsing under the strain of continuous operation. The Korth fleet immediately concentrated fire on the exposed destroyer, and Zarath watched in horror as dozens of plasma bolts reached out toward the small human vessel. What happened next would be burned into her memory forever. Instead of trying to escape or defend itself, the UES Defiance actually accelerated toward the center of the Korth formation, its weapons firing continuously. The ship wove through the incoming fire with impossible grace, its pilot performing maneuvers that should have crushed the crew under lethal G-forces. How are they surviving those accelerations? Her pilot gasped. Inertial dampeners, Zarath replied, though she wasn't entirely sure. Or genetic modifications. Or pure human stubbornness. The Defiance reached the center of the Korth formation and did something that made Zarath's entire crew gasp in amazement. The ship self-destructed, but not randomly. The explosion was shaped, directed, turning the vessel into a massive directed energy weapon that lashed out at every Korth ship within a 50-kilometer radius. When the light faded, 6 more Korth vessels were drifting hulks, and the rest of their formation was in complete disarray. Did they just? Her aide whispered. Yes, Zarath replied quietly. They just sacrificed themselves to give their comrades a better chance. Commander Walsh's voice came through the communications array again, but this time it was strained, filled with grief and rage. Ambassador, where are you? 3 minutes out, Commander. We're coming as fast as we can. Good. Because we're about to show these bastards what happens when you make humans angry. The 2 remaining human ships suddenly became visible, their stealth fields dropping completely. But instead of appearing damaged and desperate, they seemed somehow larger, more menacing than before. Weapon ports that Zarath hadn't known existed opened along their hulls, revealing armaments that had been hidden during the entire engagement. *UES Determination to UES Perseverance. Walsh's voice carried across the communication channels. Authorization Omega 77. Release all external constraints. Acknowledged. Determination. Constraints released. All systems green for Contingency Protocol 7. Zarath had no idea what Contingency Protocol 7 was, but she was about to find out. The 2 human ships began to change. Hull plates shifted and reconfigured, revealing weapon systems that belonged on ships 10 times their size. Energy readings spiked to levels that should have been impossible for vessels of their mass. Most incredibly, they seemed to be drawing power from some external source that her sensors couldn't identify. Commander Walsh, Zarath called out. What exactly are your ships? Officially? Diplomatic vessels with light escort armament, Walsh replied, and Zarath could hear the grim smile in her voice. Unofficially? They're prototype deep strike vessels designed to operate behind enemy lines for extended periods. The diplomatic mission was their cover story. The transformed human ships opened fire, and space itself seemed to tear apart around their weapons. Beams of coherent energy reached out across impossible distances, striking Korth vessels with pinpoint accuracy. Each hit didn't just damage the target ships, it completely annihilated them, leaving nothing but expanding clouds of superheated plasma. In less than 30 seconds, the Korth fleet went from 33 ships to 18. How is this possible? Zarath breathed. We've been preparing for this day for 70 years, Walsh explained as her ships continued their devastating assault. Ever since the first Korth incursion into the outer colonies. We knew they'd be back eventually, and We knew we'd have to be ready to face them alone. The remaining Korth ships, finally, recognizing that they were facing an enemy far more dangerous than they had anticipated, began to retreat toward the system's edge. But the human vessels pursued relentlessly, their weapons reaching out to claim target after target. It was then that Zarath's small fleet finally reached weapons range. All ships, she broadcast on the coalition frequency, concentrate fire on the fleeing Korth vessels. Don't let any of them escape to report back to their fleet command. Her ships weren't designed for combat, but they had weapons for defense against pirates and raiders. More importantly, they had the element of surprise. The Korth ships, focused on the threat behind them, didn't notice the new arrivals until plasma bolts began striking their rear formations. The battle became a rout. Caught between the devastating firepower of the human ships and the unexpected arrival of coalition forces, the remaining Korth vessels were systematically destroyed. Not a single enemy ship escaped the system. When the last Korth vessel vanished in a ball of superheated plasma, an eerie silence fell over the battlefield. Debris fields marked the locations where 47 warships had met their doom, but somehow, impossibly, the defenders had survived. Ambassador, Commander Walsh's voice came through the speakers. Thank you. I know you didn't have to come back. Zarath looked out at the wreckage floating in space, at the two battered human ships that had somehow stood against impossible odds, and won. She thought about the crew of the UES Defiance, who had given their lives without hesitation to protect people they barely knew. She thought about the transformation she had witnessed, not just of the ships, but of the humans themselves when pushed beyond all reasonable limits. Commander, she replied slowly, I think I'm beginning to understand something about your species. You don't fight for territory or resources or even survival. You fight for principle, for the idea that some things are worth dying for. That's part of it, Walsh agreed. But there's something else, too. We fight because someone has to. Because if we don't stand up to bullies like the Korth, who will? And because we believe that every sentient being in the galaxy deserves to live free from fear. As rescue and recovery operations began around Kepler, 442b, Zarath found herself composing the report she would send to the Veltar Confederation. How could she possibly describe what she had witnessed? How could she explain the transformation she had seen, not just in human technology, but in her understanding of what it meant to have humans as allies? The galaxy was about to learn that humanity was far more than anyone had suspected, and Zarath had the privilege of being the one to tell them. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler, 442b, Zarath found herself standing before the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Confederation, representing not just the Veltar people but serving as an official witness to what had become known as the Human Revelation. The massive amphitheater buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from over 200 species waited to hear her testimony. The events at Kepler, 442b had sent shockwaves throughout civilized space. The complete destruction of a major Korth battle fleet by 3 human vessels had been initially dismissed as impossible propaganda. But as more details emerged, as survivor accounts were verified, and as the wreckage was examined by independent investigators, the galaxy had been forced to confront a startling truth. Humanity was far more powerful than anyone had realized. Ambassador Zarath of the Veltar Confederation announced the assembly's speaker, a towering crystalline being whose voice resonated through harmonic frequencies. You have been called to provide witness testimony regarding the events in the Kepler 442b system. The assembly recognizes your words as truth under the ancient protocols. Zarath stepped forward, her diplomatic training helping her maintain composure despite the weight of the moment. Around her, hundreds of alien eyes focused on her with intense interest. This testimony would shape the galaxy's relationship with humanity for generations to come. Honored beings of the assembly, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. I stand before you not just as a witness to incredible events, but as someone whose fundamental understanding of our place in the universe was forever changed by what I experienced alongside human warriors. She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the amphitheater, showing a tactical recreation of the battle. The official records state that 3 human vessels engaged, and defeated a 47-ship Korth battle fleet. These numbers alone tell only the smallest part of the story. A ripple of disbelief passed through the assembled delegates. Even 6 months later, many still struggled to accept the reality of what had happened. What the records cannot convey, Zarate continued, is the manner of this victory. The humans did not rely on superior numbers or overwhelming firepower. Instead, they demonstrated something far more dangerous to their enemies: absolute commitment to their principles, combined with technological capabilities that they had deliberately concealed from the galaxy for decades. Ambassador Krell of the Hegemony Council, a massive beetle-like being, raised a protesting limb. "Speaker, we must question the reliability of this testimony. No species possesses the capability to defeat Korth battle fleets with such minimal forces. The witness may have been deceived by sophisticated holographic illusions." Zarate had expected this challenge. "Honored Krell, your skepticism is understandable. I shared it myself until I witnessed human technology that surpassed anything in our databases. Stealth systems that make ships invisible not just to sensors, but to direct visual observation. Weapons that can destroy capital ships from ranges previously thought impossible. Most remarkably, the ability to transform civilian vessels into frontline warships in a matter of minutes." She manipulated the holographic display to show the moment when the human ships had revealed their true nature. What we had believed to be diplomatic vessels were revealed to be prototype warships operating under deep cover. But, more than their technology, it was their tactics and their mindset that proved decisive. The display shifted to show the sacrifice of the UES Defiance. A hush fell over the assembly as they watched the human destroyer deliberately ram the center of the Korth formation, its controlled detonation crippling multiple enemy vessels. 137 human beings died in that explosion, Zarate said quietly. They chose death over retreat, not for glory or conquest, but to buy time for strangers to escape. They transformed their ship into a weapon because it was the most effective way to protect those who could not protect themselves. Ambassador Lethmore of the HFY Collective, his ethereal form shimmering with emotion, spoke into the silence. "Are you saying that humans are willing to die for beings they have no kinship with? For species they barely know?" "That is exactly what I am saying," Zarate replied. "And it is not an isolated incident. Human history is filled with similar examples. They call it the right thing to do, as if such sacrifices are simple moral calculations rather than extraordinary acts of courage." She advanced the display to show the final phase of the battle, when her own fleet had returned to assist the humans. "When I made the decision to return to the battlefield, I violated direct orders from the human commander who had specifically told us to stay away for our own safety. Yet when we arrived, they welcomed our assistance without question, even though our ships added only modest firepower to their capabilities." The display now showed the aftermath: debris fields where 47 Korth ships had been destroyed, and 2 heavily damaged but victorious human vessels maintaining station over the planet they had protected. The implications of what occurred at Kepler 442b extend far beyond a single battle, Zarate continued. The Korth hegemony had planned to use that system as a staging ground for deeper incursions into our space. Intelligence recovered from the wreckage indicates that they viewed our species as weak, divided, and ripe for conquest. The human victory has forced them to completely reassess their expansion plans. Ambassador Trixka of the Rigel Commonwealth clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. "You speak of implications, Ambassador Zarate. What do you believe this means for the balance of power in our region?" Zarate had been preparing for this question for months. "Honored Assembly, we have been operating under a fundamental misconception about human capabilities and intentions. For 2 centuries, we have viewed them as a young species, still learning their place in the galactic community. What Kepler 442b revealed is that they have been carefully studying all of us, learning from our technologies, our tactics, our strengths, and weaknesses." She paused to let this sink in before continuing. "They have been preparing for threats that the rest of us either ignored or considered manageable. While we focused on trade agreements and diplomatic protocols, they were building defenses against enemies we thought were safely contained in distant space." The holographic display shifted to show strategic maps of known Korth territory, and the buffer zones that had kept them separated from the main civilized regions. The humans have been quietly maintaining watch stations along these boundaries for decades. They knew the Korth were massing fleets long before the rest of us detected any movement. They tried to warn us through diplomatic channels, but their concerns were dismissed as paranoia from an inexperienced species. A new voice spoke up from the Yolan Republic section. If the humans possess such capabilities, why did they choose to conceal them? What did they gain by appearing weaker than they truly are? Zara Th smiled, remembering a conversation she'd had with Commander Walsh during the post-battle recovery operations. I asked Commander Walsh that exact question. Her response was illuminating. She said that humans prefer to be underestimated by their enemies and trusted by their friends. By concealing their true military capabilities, they avoided becoming a target for preventive strikes while maintaining the element of surprise against genuine threats. The display now showed human ships from the battle, their transformed configurations clearly visible. But there is something else, something that may be even more significant than their technology. The humans fight differently than any species we have previously encountered. They do not seek to conquer or subjugate their enemies. They seek to eliminate threats while minimizing casualties among all sentient beings. Explain this distinction, demanded Ambassador Krelth. During the battle, the human ships had multiple opportunities to destroy Korth vessels with all hands. Instead, they consistently targeted specific systems, weapons, engines, life support. They disabled ships rather than destroying them whenever possible. Only when the Korth refused to surrender did the humans resort to complete destruction. Zara Th manipulated the display to highlight the tactical patterns. This approach is tactically inefficient, but morally consistent with human philosophy. They believe that even their enemies deserve the chance to surrender and survive. It is a principle they maintain, even at personal cost. The assembly fell silent as delegates contemplated the implications. Finally, the speaker's harmonic voice filled the chamber. Ambassador Zara Th, in your opinion, what should be the Galactic Confederation's response to these revelations about human capabilities? This was the moment Zara Th had been building toward throughout her testimony. Honored speaker, I believe we stand at a crossroads. We can view the revelation of human capabilities as a threat to the existing order, or we can recognize it as an opportunity to strengthen the security of all civilized species. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed a strategic overview of the galaxy's major powers and threat vectors. The humans have demonstrated that they possess both the ability and the willingness to stand against existential threats to galactic civilization. They fought at Kepler 442b not for territory or resources, but to prevent the Korth from establishing a foothold that would threaten all of our peoples. Are you suggesting a formal alliance? Asked Ambassador Lethmore. I am suggesting something more than that, Zara Th replied. I am suggesting that we recognize what the humans have already become, the galaxy's first true guardians. They have appointed themselves as defenders not of human interests alone, but of the principle that sentient beings should be free to develop and thrive without fear of conquest or extermination. The implications of her words rippled through the assembly. A formal recognition of human guardianship would fundamentally alter the balance of galactic politics. Consider the evidence, Zara Th continued. Human colonies are found throughout contested space, not seeking to exploit resources, but serving as early warning stations against threats from beyond civilized borders. Human ships patrol trade routes not to collect tolls, but to protect merchant vessels from piracy. Human diplomats work tirelessly to resolve conflicts between other species, asking for nothing in return but peaceful cooperation. She advanced the display to show the current disposition of human forces throughout the galaxy. They have been doing this work quietly, without recognition or reward, for decades. Kepler 442b simply made their efforts visible to those of us who had never bothered to look closely. Ambassador Krelth's translator crackled with skepticism. And what guarantee do we have that these guardians will not eventually become conquerors themselves? History teaches us that military power inevitably seeks political dominance. Zara Th had anticipated this concern as well. The guarantee lies in their fundamental nature, demonstrated through 2 centuries of consistent behavior. Humans possess the most advanced military technology in the galaxy, yet their territories have not expanded through conquest. They have intervened in dozens of conflicts, yet they have never claimed territory or demanded tribute from those they protected. The display shifted to show historical examples of human intervention. When the Veltar faced the crystalline plague, it was human medical technology that provided the cure, shared freely without payment. When the Rigel trade routes were threatened by pirates, it was human patrol fleets that cleared the space lanes, then withdrew without establishing permanent bases. When the Thek's homeworld faced ecological collapse, it was human environmental engineers who provided the solutions that saved their civilization. Each time, she continued, the humans could have demanded concessions, territorial rights, or preferential trade agreements. Instead, they asked only that the species they helped consider joining the growing community of peaceful civilizations. The assembly buzzed with quiet conversations as delegates consulted with their advisors. Finally, the speaker called for order. Ambassador Zarth, you have presented compelling testimony. But, we must ask, what do the humans themselves say about their role in galactic affairs? Zarth smiled. They would say that they are simply doing what any decent species would do when faced with threats to innocent life. They do not seek recognition or special status. In fact, when I asked Commander Walsh about the possibility of formal Guardian recognition, she seemed uncomfortable with the idea. Why? Asked Ambassador Lethmore. Because they believe that true guardianship cannot be appointed by others. It must be earned through consistent action and maintained through continued service. They fear that formal recognition might corrupt their mission or create expectations that politics cannot fulfill. The speaker's harmonics shifted to indicate consideration. What then do you recommend, Ambassador? I recommend that we do what we should have done long ago. Pay attention. The humans have been our guardians whether we acknowledged it or not. Now that we know the truth, we have the opportunity to support their efforts rather than remaining passive beneficiaries. Zarth gestured to the assembled delegates. Every species represented here has benefited from human protection. The trade routes we use safely, the colonies we establish without fear of invasion, the conflicts that are resolved before they become wars. All of this has been made possible by human vigilance. They do not ask us to become warriors, she continued. But they need our support in other ways. Intelligence sharing, technological cooperation, diplomatic backing when they face criticism for their interventions. Most importantly, they need us to understand that their strength serves all of our interests. The display now showed a projection of the galaxy with human influence clearly marked. The choice before us is simple. We can continue to benefit from human protection while pretending it does not exist, or we can embrace our role as partners in maintaining galactic peace. As Zarth concluded her testimony, she thought back to that moment 6 months ago when she had watched 3 human ships prepare to face impossible odds. She remembered the quiet determination in Marcus Chen's voice, the fierce loyalty that had driven Commander Walsh, and her crews to stand firm against overwhelming force. The galaxy was about to learn what she had discovered that day, that standing beside humans meant standing beside beings who would die before they would abandon their principles. It meant allying with a species that measured victory not in territory conquered or enemies destroyed, but in innocent lives protected and civilizations preserved. The vote, when it came, was not unanimous. Some species remained skeptical of human power, while others feared the precedent of acknowledging one species as guardian over others. But a significant majority voted to establish formal cooperation protocols with human defense forces, recognizing their unique role in maintaining galactic security. As the assembly dispersed and delegates returned to their homeworlds, Zarth received a message from Commander Walsh, now promoted to Admiral and serving as humanity's official liaison to the Galactic Defense Initiative. Thank you. The message read simply, not for the recognition, but for helping others understand why this work matters. The galaxy is safer when we all stand together. Zarth smiled as she composed her reply. She had learned many things during her time with humans, but perhaps the most important was this. True strength was not measured in firepower or conquest, but in the willingness to sacrifice for others without counting the cost. The humans had taught the galaxy that lesson at Kepler. 442b, and she had been privileged to stand witness to their fury without end, a fury directed not at the innocent, but at those who would threaten them. The day she had stood beside humans and seen their true nature had changed everything. Now it was time for the rest of the galaxy to learn what she had discovered, that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or their tactics, but their unshakable belief that every sentient being deserved to live free from fear. And they were willing to die to protect that belief.